this episode, we discuss grief and loss with an in-depth conversation surrounding pet loss. We understand the gravity of this discussion and the impact of this topic. If you are not in a place to listen, we understand and we hope you find healing. We encourage everyone, listener or not, to investigate the resources available in our show notes.
Welcome to another episode of Beers and Biscuits, everyone. We have a bit of a heavy topic today, but we are looking forward to opening this conversation and hopefully providing you guys an avenue that maybe you didn't know you needed, and here you are. So I'm Karen.
And I'm Nicole, and we have with us today Amanda Davis. Amanda is an award winning educator, author, illustrator, and innovator whose use of words and pictures bring light and kindness to the world. She earned her undergraduate degree in English and studio art from Salve Regina University and her master's in art education from Tufts University School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Amanda was named the 2020 Massachusetts Secondary Art Educator of the Year. She has even been named a 2019 Sunlight Press photography winner for her photograph Icelandic Horses. Amanda is featured in the Writer's Loft book Friends and Anemones, Ocean Poems for Children, and she is the author of the award winning book 30,000 Stitches, the inspiring story of the National 9/11 flag, which received nationwide acclaim. She has just recently published her second book, Moonlight Memories. But on top of all of that, more importantly, she is a former client and a friend. So, Amanda, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So why don't you just give us a little bit about yourself and any other current projects? I know you just put out Moonlight Memories and it's been getting a lot of really nice buzz. I've been seeing it all over social media. But do you have anything else in the works or anything coming up?
Yeah, so thank you for that lovely introduction. And yes, Moonlight Memories was just published in June, and I actually have another unannounced nonfiction picture book that you both may enjoy. It's about the human-animal bond. And it also has, just like Moonlight Memories, themes of loss and healing in it, but how we can connect to nature and really bond with animals and wildlife and what we can do to conserve our planet. I'm very excited for that one. And then I have another fiction one in the works that is based on another, I don't like to say tough experience in my life because it's kind of labeling it as something, but I guess, yeah, difficult thing in my life, but I hope it will bring understanding and comfort to children, as with Moonlight Memories. So yeah, I have two more projects coming up, and just right now doing author visits and signings and getting to read the book to kids, Moonlight Memories, and that's one of my favorite parts of creating.
I really wanted to have you on. As you know, I've written quite a lot about loss. So it's going to be super hard to get through. So I've written quite a lot about loss lately. The reason why I wanted to have you on was because quite recently after Charlie had passed away, we were out walking the dogs and we were just had met up and just getting to talking and we were just talking about grief and how pervasive it is sometimes and um, encompassing it can be, but also how we can grieve things that we don't necessarily expect to grieve. And so, I wanted to kind of have you on because it was really eye-opening for me to hear you talk about how you were feeling about the move that you guys had made and kind of this we get put in these conflicting situations sometimes where we want to be happy about things or we want to find joy in things, but we're still feeling those emotions and not really recognizing that we can be grieving something. And so I just kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, what you were feeling when you moved and how you're feeling now.
Yeah, thank you. So both of my first two picture books both have ideas of, or themes, I should say, of grief and loss, but also healing in them. My first book, 30,000 Stitches, that you talked about, had elements of September 11th, and the healing aspect was how the flag was restored. And then the second book, Moonlight Memories, is based off of the loss of my own father and using art and creativity as a way to heal. So loss and grief are definitely something that have been a part of, yeah, my writing and my art, and a way for me to process, which is all about what Moonlight Memories is about. But I would say it wasn't until recently, like when we were chatting, that I realized that grief doesn't go away, and that, for me at least, and I think for many people, it's this continuous journey of healing or of ups and downs, and there's different transitions in your life where it may affect you again in a way that you never really expected. So for example, we had recently had our daughter Autumn. Yeah, and I was struggling postpartum. That was a huge change. I think I was actually grieving my past life before becoming a mother. So that was something that I was grieving. I think I was grieving becoming a parent and not having one of my parents alive. Like that was coming back for me. And then we moved out of a community that I felt attached to. We had been in for 10 years. So I was grieving my home, an object, which was really interesting. So all of these things came together at once for me. I think they were building up and building up, but then when we moved, that was like the breaking point, and I was really struggling. And actually, one of the aha moments for me was when I got like an advanced copy of my book in the mail. The editor had sent it to me, of Moonlight Memories. And I was like, I'm going to read it to my daughter, Autumn. And I was reading it to her, and I was like realizing that I wasn't doing the things that even make me feel good, to make me feel better. And one of them was art making. So as I was reading the
Right.
book, I'm like, you know what? I need to go back to some of the things that I know have helped me feel better in the past and really push myself to do them again. Even if I don't feel like creating, just do something that's easy, like a doodle, or just paint a piece of paper or something. But that was kind of like an aha moment for me. I was like reading the book to her, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is my story, and I'm not even doing the things that I know help me heal. So yeah, I think that you can grieve all sorts of things. And I think that it's going to be a constant in your life of ups and downs and transitions that can affect things. I also found that to be true, especially when I was writing 30,000 Stitches, when I was talking to people who lost daughters on September 11th, or just people who had these very traumatic losses that were still 20 years later healing. And if they had had children, they were just helping their children get by. And now, 20 years later, when their children were all grown, now they started to grieve. So, yeah, you can grieve many times for the same thing or same person in your life, in many different things, I think.
Right. And it is kind of what you've said too. It is a little bit compounding, I think. There are things that are expected that we grieve. A family member passing, or, things like that. It's almost expected that we grieve those things. But there are so many ways in which we can grieve that I think are not even recognized. You talking about, this compounding grief of, all of these things on top of each other. That's kind of how I feel like I felt too, having lost my home and grieving my former life in another state, doing, a different job, all of those things. It was a grieving process that I didn't really allow myself to feel like that I should be grieving that. So I had all of this grief of a past life and a former life, and, you know, things that I had wanted for myself, or dreams that I had that I wasn't able to realize. It just compounded, and it was just so hard to just allow myself to feel what I needed to feel. When we talk about that, it's a lifelong process, because especially if there are things that aren't necessarily what people think of as typical to grieve, we tend to shutter those, and so we're not really allowing ourselves what we need to do to heal. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately part of that is this societal idea that we're not supposed to quote unquote grieve in certain ways or grieve certain things. And I hope that we can start changing that and having a conversation that it is okay to grieve a home. We have to start normalizing this idea that grief is okay. No, we don't need to wallow in it and live there, but grief and sadness and all of the emotions are okay regardless.
Yeah, I remember in one of the support programs that I did postpartum, they had this phrase, resist and it persists. And we spoke about that in terms of some of those uncomfortable feelings like sadness and even anger or grief. We tend to want to push them away. And the harder we push them away, the harder they're going to persist. So learning to sit with them, like you said, Karen, maybe not wallow, but just understand them will allow us to heal. And when you were talking about normalizing, that's really what I hope that my books will do for children, for adults, because honestly, I feel like it's the adults that get really uncomfortable talking about it. Or we use different terms, especially with pet loss, like, oh, the dog is sleeping forever, or the dog went to wherever. When, from the research I've done, we should just say that our dog died. And just be very straightforward. So trying to normalize that and give parents and caregivers tools to help discuss these things. Because I think the younger we can do it and create this understanding around it, like the easier it will be in these big transitions where some of these feelings might come up for
Right.
children to then become adults who can properly sit with these emotions and feel these emotions.
That does bring up a really good point, though, that I think something that's really missed sometimes is that often our very first experience with grief or experience with death is, as a child with a pet loss. And I even remember the first time that our family lost a pet. There was no discussion about it or talk about it. It was just the pet was just gone, right? Like there was no, let's talk about it, right? And then there's always this idea for whatever reason about pets that then there's this replacement to the grief. Oh, it's okay. We'll get you another fish. Or even what you said, Amanda, about, Fluffy sleeping and, you know, we'll just go and we'll get a cute kitten and that will kind of make you forget all about it. And there isn't really that identifying a finality to it that we need to recognize and deal with. And obviously that's age related. I mean, I understand that. I'm not saying to scare your children when their pet dies. But I think that there is something to be said for what you've said about having an honest discussion. Just because you haven't talked about the death of that pet or the grief surrounding that pet doesn't mean that the child isn't experiencing it or isn't feeling it.
I agree. Two things came to mind. Our cat, when I was young, the same thing happened. Like Sheba was there one day, and then Sheba was gone. I mean, they did say to me like we had to put Sheba to sleep, but like there was no like discussion about it, and then it would just happened. And then also when my dad died, no one really talked about it. And like you were saying, to me, that felt like people didn't care, which I'm sure was not the case. But silence can sometimes infer that for the grown up, like they might be grieving in their own way. So it's hard to talk about those things with a child when you might be going through your own big feelings. But there are, yeah, like resources and other things that can be helpful to get you through those conversations too.
I know for me personally, like I feel better writing. I mean, obviously, you've heard my voice break a couple times already, but I feel better writing about it and writing my feelings down about that than talking about it. Because there's a little bit of a separation there. I wouldn't say a wall by not talking about it, but by writing about it. But there is a little distance that I can create for myself instead of, sitting down and talking to somebody and just, letting it all out.
Like discussion might not be it might not be you might not be ready for that like right away, and so there are ways to, like you were saying, be able to kind of start the process of coping and healing.
And it is, what has to help or what you feel is going to help you. This past, well, last month. We had gone up to the place where we all, have taken the dogs for a summer vacation for years now. And, armed with all of my grief recovery resources, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take Zed and Charlie's ashes and we're going to go up there and I'm going to have this little like moment on the side of the river and I'm going to spread their ashes in the place where they had the most fun on the planet. And it's going to be this incredible healing journey for me. Except I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It was still so raw and so hard for me that even the thought of removing their ashes from the urn, even though in my brain I was going to put them somewhere where I knew that they would want to be, I was still so much in that grieving process and not really understanding how far that I was that I couldn't do it. I feel like we have to also be okay with recognizing where we are in that cycle that you're talking about and knowing that wherever we are in that cycle, it's okay for us to be there. There's no timeline on it. Doing what we need to do at that point is okay. Not, well, it'll be better in a month or whatever these arbitrary timelines are sometimes that we put on grief, that it's not there and that wherever we are in that process that it's okay to be there.
Giving yourself grace, that is what I learned a lot to do. It's hard when you're struggling or going through difficult things, but
I say that all the time to my clients in training to remember to give yourself grace in the training process. And that's such a trivial thing in this kind of conversation. So, giving yourself grace in the grieving process is even more important. I think we also have to remember to not listen to the outside sources telling us that it's just a dog or it's just a pet or it's been X amount of time. It's time to move on.
Right. Time to move on. That's my favorite one.
Ugh,
Yep.
it's infuriating.
Well, and I think there's a different way. I mean, I understand where that thought is coming from, right? Because the person wants to provide you with some sort of comfort that they understand your grief and that moving on or finding things that would help you move on are going to ultimately hopefully make you feel better. But it's that thought of you can just move on that's dismissive and that there wasn't really this discussion or really any talking, about what you were feeling or what had happened. So it's almost like it's not meant to be dismissive, but it is, in a sense, it is kind of dismissive to people.
So then I have a question for the two of you because I am kind of a little bit out of my depth here. We did not have pets growing up, or well, we did, but they were mice, and that's a whole nother story. So and it's not the kindest way of putting this, but I have been fortunate to not experience a pet loss yet. So instead of people saying things like just get over it or it's been this long, what would you rather hear from people, whether it's a pet or a family member or what question or what phrase would be more comforting, do you think?
I mean, for me, I think, and I try to really be aware of it too, because obviously with our business and Amanda, I mean, you have experienced this tangentially through our business as well, that we have a lot of pet loss in our business. And so I try really hard sometimes to not, say things like, I know how you feel, because I don't. I know how I feel or how I felt. And so for me, I think I would rather people ask me about them than to say that they know how it feels to lose them.
I feel the same. I feel like someone saying, even just, like, I'm here for you, sending pictures maybe of, if it's a person, like sharing memories of the pet or the person. I think sometimes we're afraid to do that when we're on the other end of it, but it's like the person's already thinking about it. You're not going to make them start thinking about it. Like it's already on
Right.
their mind. I think that's what we're afraid of. Like, oh no, we're going to make them sad. Well, they're already sad.
Right.
But if you're sending them like a happy moment in time, it could actually make them feel better. And maybe not everyone. I find that that's what has helped me, and not being afraid to talk about the person or the pet or whoever it is that you've lost, because you want to remember them too. You don't want to not talk about them.
Right. It is hard because, you want to convey your empathy for that person and what they're going through and that loss without, like I said, without really diminishing it in any way. But, we do walk this very fine tightrope sometimes because we don't talk about it enough, right? So even, I find myself, I'm very, very sorry for your loss. And then okay, I gotta like backspace that and be like, I gotta come up with something a little bit better because that's just, I'm sorry for your loss. But it's like, what am I really trying to say to the person? I'm really trying to say, I'll just say Archie. I'm gonna miss Archie. Or, I'm going to miss coming to, pick up your pet every day versus I'm sorry for your loss because they already know that we're sorry, I think. I try to be really cognizant of that, I guess.
That is because I'm just
I
gonna.
can't I can't I'm trying so hard not to cry.
I'm over here just like, thank God for mute. Thank God.
That's okay. It's okay to cry, Karen. That's why we're here.
I
We're
know,
here to
but I just
cry.
wish I could hug everybody. So
Okay.
so so yes, I mean I try really hard to be more purposeful in those messages and not just I don't know what the word is, but platitude, is that the right word, Amanda, teacher?
I think so.
we'll go with yes. I'm
To
sure.
not just
That
give,
sounds right.
yeah,
Oh,
to
yeah.
not just
Yeah, I think, yeah.
give,
Yeah.
to
Like a
I'm sure.
blanket statement or
I'm
give
sure somebody
something
in the
that they
comments
can.
will say it's not. They'll tell us. Somebody will tell us.
Right.
hard to know what to say. It really is. It really is. I think if you knew the person or the pet more deeply, then yeah, thinking about something a little bit more personal or a memory you shared with them, or like I remember saying to you, Nicole, with both Zed and Charlie, like those really were Cora's first best friends. Like we knew them as long as we've had Cora. Like so it was, I felt sad as well, like that, and sometimes I imagine for you too with your clients, like you don't get to say goodbye to them, and that's really hard too. Like even with Charlie and Zed, like I kind of wanted to pet them. Like I wanted to be like, bye. Like I don't know. Like I loved them, and they showed Cora like how to be a good dog. And you did too. You did too.
Right. And I mean, and you got to see them in a different way too. I mean, you guys and Cora all came to Zed's 15th birthday pizza party that we had. One of my absolute best memories with Charlie was the therapy day we did for your classroom. That was so moving of an experience for me as a person to see how oh, okay. How touched your students were by his presence. That was so amazing. And so, knowing that I'm not the only one that has grieved him, it means a lot because he isn't just a dog.
Yeah, they have an impact on people. I
That's
remember that day. Yeah. I taught high school for 12 years, high school art, and yeah, Nicole brought Charlie in for like an art therapy day, and the students drew Charlie. He was so good. He sat there like a good figure drawing model. And then we just got to learn about, yeah, what Nicole does. And they got to pet Charlie. We had some students that were really afraid of dogs, but got close to Charlie. And it was like a really special environment and such a special day for them. They were looking forward to it. And you create those memories. Hmm.
Right. And then you surprised me with all of their little notes that they wrote to him, which are still on my wall, by the way. I have a huge, huge frame that has all of their little individual notes that they wrote to Charlie. So, yeah. So, I mean, I think about things like that, right? Like those are the things that I hold on to. It helps me get through that sadness because I can kind of waffle between this intense sadness and this amazing amount of just joy. And I don't even think that's the right word. Like, it doesn't even encompass the emotion of how proud I was to be their guardians and, have me go through life with them. So I do try to focus on that instead of the sadness a lot.
So now that we've all established that we need to remember to bring tissues to the next time we record this.
Tissues, beers, and biscuits. Maybe
Yeah,
that's what this one's
perfect.
called.
This is obviously a very heavy, deep conversation that I don't think can be properly summed up in one podcast. So when our listeners step away today, what can they turn to for a little bit more guidance or support?
So again, there's some resources in the back of my book, but one that comes to mind that I've been in connection with is Heal Grief. They're an online resource. They have a bunch of different support groups that meet live online. They have information about pet loss. They had some interesting facts online, such as the death of a family pet is often the first significant loss a child experiences. Approximately 63% of children with pet loss, they lose the pet before age of 7. So knowing how to handle it and help them in the grieving process is important. And pets are also often the first living thing they learn to care for. So
Right.
like remembering that too is a really special connection there.
I picked up the Grief Recovery Handbook, which I read a long time ago when I was in college for one of our classes. But I figured it's great to read it again and go through it again. I think a good, easy place to start for a lot of people. It goes through, like kind of everything that we've touched on, a lot of the different types of grief, grieving things that maybe aren't considered typical, and also looking at what are some of the physical manifestations of grief versus just the emotional manifestations of grief.
Mm-hmm. It's good to have options, when you do what you feel comfortable and what you feel like fits you.
So that you did bring up a really good point about the kind of the memorial jewelry. And so that that kind of makes me think about how we consume art to various degrees throughout the healing process. A lot of us do. And especially I see it a lot with pet loss. So we commission things like paintings or drawings. We often get, memorial jewelry like I have. I actually have Zed's ashes that I wear with me. We'll get sculptures of our pets or even, personalized urns and things like that. Why do you feel, as the artist, Amanda, why do you feel like art is so helpful in the grieving and healing process?
I mean, that's a good question. For me, it always has been very helpful. And I guess I've never really thought about the why. Like, I think personally, it's just been a place to, I guess, kind of escape, but it just brings me into a different space in my mind. And there's actually an interesting book called or Your Brain on Art. And now there's scientific evidence behind the idea that when you create, it does something to your body, like to put you in a state that is calming. So, as an art teacher, that's something I always knew and believed, but now we have some science to back it up, which is always nice. So, I think that that's really what it is. You get into, I don't know if anyone's read about the flow state, but like when I create, I get into that state where it's just very calming. It brings me comfort. For me, the process is always more important, the process of creating and how you're feeling, the learnings that go into it. But then when you've created something, like I still can't believe I've created a book with Michelle Jing Chan, whose awesome art is the illustrations in this book, but you created something from nothing. I think that's so cool. And whether it's for yourself or to share with other people, it doesn't really matter. And it comes from you. Like it's so unique to you and your experiences. And even if you're drawing the same thing, I've seen this as an art teacher, if 25 people were drawing the same thing, it would come out different. And I just think that's so interesting too. So I think it's very personal. I think it's very reflective of your own experiences, your own way of seeing the world. With that, I think there's this sense of healing that can come from creating. And whether you think you're an artist or not, even like I said, just doodling something, like just doing something creative can really help you feel good. And I truly believe that.
I feel like it's a way to channel what's inside out. So, like that saying you had in, from your group, that resist and it persists, it's a way to get that out. And like another thing you said, it's a tangible way to hold on to it and just not have to sit with it, or sit with it in a different way that you can look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, and when I think about like the jewelry that you were talking about, Nicole, that the memorial stuff, it is like you were saying, Karen, it's something tangible that you can have with you, that you can turn to remember that pet that you loved or the person that you loved. And I think there is something comforting about that. I have a locket with my dad's picture in it that I carry with me a lot. I usually have it, when I'm doing events for my books and things like that. So it just feels like he's right there. So yeah, I think there's something about having that piece of art that just makes it feel like that person or that thing is close to you.
Talk a little bit about, why you decided to write that book. And then where do you feel like you are now with that process of that, like getting through the book and writing the book and all of that has helped you?
Moonlight Memories, as I said, it's written by me, illustrated by Michelle Jing Chan, and it tells the story of this young girl named Piper who lost her mama, and she's using art specifically in this book as a way to remember and realize that the memory of her mother is with her always, and then also begin to share that with her father at the end. So it's based on my own parent loss, and using creativity to heal. Writing it, I feel like, came out actually more quickly than some of my other books. And I think that was kind of telling in a way, like the story just needed to be released, like we've been talking about. There were a lot of revisions after that, but the initial draft, I think it was a bit freeing in that way. And as I also was saying before, I remember when I was younger, people were not talking about it. It was almost like life just kind of kept going on. So I think, Karen, you had said like it's a way to voice something that you might not have the words for either. So it was important to me to tell this story so that if other children are going through similar things, or even adults, they can feel less alone in that, and they can realize and be encouraged to find their own outlets to help them express their feelings and process, difficult things in their lives. And at the same time, it was doing that for me, like as I was writing the story. So today I would say, my dad died now over 20 years ago. And I know there will be other points in my life that, again, like a wave will come. I think about it, like that part of it never goes away. But like I was saying, I think those big transitions in my life, it came back during those times. And I know those are going to happen again at some point. So I expect that to happen. I've developed more tools to help me, which I feel good about. But yeah, I think it's inevitable to have those times in your life where they're more difficult. We have our Cora, our dog, who's still with
Right.
us. She's 11. And I know that when she leaves this earth, like that is going to be another wave for me. I don't even want to, I can't think about it. I know it's going to happen, but it's always there. And I guess I can expect it more to become more in the forefront at different changes in my life.
Now, you had just briefly touched on this, Amanda, and I think this kind of leads back into what you were saying, Nicole, about how like some of us can't talk about it, but it's important to talk about it. And you had started to bring up some resources.
If you've lost a loved one, a human loved one, Empower Her is a really great local organization. I think they changed their name to Empower, and I started volunteering with them, and they're an organization that does one-to-one mentoring. So for example, if you're a grown-up who lost a parent when you were young, now you're grown up, you are matched up with now a child or a young adult who has also lost a parent. And I think they try to also do it with similar circumstances. At first, it was mothers and daughters only, mother and daughter loss, but they've expanded it to all parent loss, so father loss and things like that. So that's a really great local organization. And now they're international too, but they started here in the South Shore. And then, Heal Grief, speaking to people, reaching out for help with a counselor, like professional counseling, I definitely recommend. And then, some of the books, which I love talking about books. The Rough Patch is a great one by Brian Lees. That one's a great one. The End of Something Wonderful, A Practical Guide to a Backyard Funeral, is also great. It not only goes over like the grief of losing a pet, but how to kind of memorialize them, and in a way that's kind of lighter too. The Longest Let's Go Boy, that one's a tearjerker. Point of view of the dog it's written in. This one's not out yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's called An Ofrenda for Perro. I'm really looking forward to this one too because it's also about the Day of the Dead and how they celebrate loss in different cultures, and this one in the Mexican culture. And I think it's really interesting. I used to teach about Day of the Dead as an art teacher, how the Mexican culture looks at death. And it's more of a celebration of life than anything else. And like, how do we honor this person? And it's bright colors and marigolds and all of these beautiful things that are put on an altar to, remind you of the person. So I'm really excited for An Ofrenda for Perro. I shared this one with you, Nicole, a while ago, and this one's more about like having a sick pet that their life may end soon. It's called Stay, A Girl, a Dog, and a Bucket List. Yeah, there's a lot of great picture books out there, and they can even be read by adults too. You can find comfort in them as a grown-ups.
This has been one of our heaviest podcasts so far, but definitely a conversation that needs to be had, needs to be normalized. I think I can speak for all of us here that we would be honored if you feel like it is the appropriate decision for you to share your story in the comments so that we can honor your pets or your losses. And also it's just a space for you to remember them and share. And we look forward to speaking with you and talking to you in the next Beers and Biscuits. Thanks so much, guys.